All right, just try this out, see how it goes. Something I kind of wanted to do anyways, right? So, spent a lot of time in this division. I spent, also 6 years as a national raider oversight, so I have a little bit of, knowledge behind some, kind of how this process goes. And there's so many great wrestlers, right? That Division One, Big Ten, obviously like a lot of that stuff gets a lot of coverage, but great wrestlers at every level. And so try to use my platform to shine a light on that a little bit. One question that I have gotten, a little bit, in the comments is, hey, how is a team ranked, first in their conference and then they're behind the second place team in the national ratings? The reason that happens, you're going to be able to see kind of like these point totals. So essentially, right, the higher rating that you get, so you could have a guy that's fifth or sixth in your conference, but he's not going to be a top 25 guy in the country. So some of those point totals are going to vary. And, you could have one guy ranked, first, and you could get 25 points. So it kind of tiers down, that way. So say you have a number one ranked wrestler and, you get 25 points, for that. Or if you're 25th, you get one. And so you're going to see these higher point totals, and lower, and vice versa. So like those rankings aren't always going to be in order. And this is also a preseason ranking, so take it with a grain of salt. Ultimately, it's just going to kind of be highest returning All-American, and then qualifier, right? And then at that weight class. And so you're going to see, some of this stuff kind of vary a bit. But all right, without any further ado, we'll look at 125 right here. All right, so me, right? I'm gonna ride with some of my dogs, right? Some of the guys I used to coach, but for good reason. This is a weight, and there's a lot of weights kind of like this year too. You had two teammates wrestling for the national title last year, Gabe Gonzalez and Aiden Reeves. Both those guys are gone. This weight really kind of clears out. Number one ranked Brody G, tough, right? Multiple time All-American. But one thing I will say, right, you look at like 13, and not to get on my soapbox too early, but, he redshirted last year, so he's not going to have that returning AA, returning qualifier, that kind of jumps you up that list. But, in that redshirt season, he wrestled this, Connor Hewick. He beat him 16-1. And then you start looking, well, this national tournament gets seeded out to 16. And, on 13, you're looking at wrestling a, pretty high seed, right off the rip, as opposed to, being kind of in one of those AA seeds. And there's no easy path at the national tournament, but, kind of one of the annoying things, about this is, like that's a situation where you're probably not really guessing, because, those guys have wrestled, and I'm sure there's some other criteria involved, but, we saw this a lot in seeding too. You could have head-to-head, you could have, common opponent, but unless you're within a certain range, right, there's really not much you can do. So when there's 9 spots and you start there and you have one guy that's from Florida and one guy that's from Kansas, the likelihood of them wrestling, or even really wrestling, common opponents, isn't likely. And so that's something that you'd like to see maybe be a little bit more accurate right out of the gate. With that being said, I have done the ratings, and it sucks, and it's a lot of work, so I ain't trying to be a hater, but thankless job. Shout out to everybody. That sometimes you don't even want to do it, man. Sometimes you just get outvoted and you kind of just get stuck with it. But all right, moving on. And I guess I should have prefaced it a little bit, right? I'm not gonna dig super deep. I'm gonna kind of just give you my initial thoughts, maybe see a guy, or maybe something that like maybe is an easy fix. Before I move on, right? This is a Cumberland's, Kentucky. I know they got the Indian Hills transfer. I know he's really, really highly rated, in junior college last season. And then I think they hired a few of the old Menlo staff. And so those are probably a couple names that, you're going to see pop up. I think a couple of their, older wrestlers, ended up over there with them. So for me, this one, another weight class where you have both national finalists gone. All right. So, name to kind of watch, and guy that I think is, and all these guys are really good, right? So keep that in mind. Just passing the eye test, things like that. Gabe Gonzalez last year, freshman, makes it to national finals, ultimately loses to Reeves, but he beat Joey Cruz, who was one of Iowa's starters. Took him to the Big Ten. I mean, he's had a great season. I think he bonused his way to the national finals. That's just a guy that, you know, you can look at these ratings and say, hey, this is number one, this is number, you know, blah, 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 whatever. But when I'm looking at it, that's probably, at least as it stands right now, like who you're going to have to beat to win it. I'm wrong a lot, so sorry if I jinxed you or just don't know you yet. It's probably very possible. 41, man. So like this is a pretty common theme, I think, across, you know, really almost all these weights. I mean, so there's some familiar names here, but you know, you had Carson Taylor's national champ last year. I want to say, you know, Hartwell Taylor, national champ the year before that. And then they, you know, wrestled, gosh, you know, I apologize, Southern Oregon, right? But I think multiple time national finalists. So, you know, you get, you know, the two champs and a guy that wrestled in the finals last 2 years that are gone from this weight. So right now it's just really kind of wide open. You know, so to speak, just a couple of like outliers, and I could totally be wrong, but just a chance to maybe talk about something else. I know like Mills has kind of been around for, you know, quite a while, but they actually just switched over to the Hart Conference, so that'll be kind of interesting to see. He's kind of, you know, probably their dude, and, you know, making a jump into, you know, going from the AMC to the Hart. I mean, that's a pretty, you know, steep incline, and so, you know, having a guy that you can kind of count on that, you know, is borderline top 10 there is, you know, really, really huge for them. You know, kind of been through it, you know, wrestled at the national tournament, kind of knows what he's getting himself into, and kind of going from there. So 49, all right, so you have the two national finalists that are, you know, top two. One of, you know, first weight where we've seen the, you know, champ coming back and his opponent. Cool thing about this, though, I think, you know, Larson was maybe like an 8 seed last year, and Highstand, like, man, I want to say he was even probably lower than that, right? Just both had, you know, an unbelievable tournament. So, you know, a little bit of something to build on for him. You know, in terms of new names, the name that jumped out to me right away is Jaden Tulance. All right, the last that I knew, he was a national finalist at Carl Albert State, which isn't that far away from me. And then I thought he had went out to Life. I think he's a Texas guy, so kind of seeing him over at Wayland. You know, they have a coach that was a couple-time NAIA champ himself. I'm sure he's going to be really well coached, you know, ready to rock. But and then the other name that kind of jumped out, which I haven't really, you know, watched a ton of him wrestling, but you see Balmaceda, right? And you see that Gavin Balmaceda name. You know, Brevin was a multiple-time national champ, really, really good. So, you know, if it runs in the family, that's a dude that you see ranked 17th that, you know, could really, really likely make some noise. All right, so going to 57, you know, Providence has a number one ranked guy. Man, those guys are like, you know, always really, really tough. You know, he's really, really good on top. I'm sure, you know, this kind of went in order of All-American from last year, but this is, you know, like when I really start to kind of look at this, and there's a couple things, you kind of see like these numbers got out of whack here a little bit, but Alex Ramirez, I want to say he might have majored, you know, Padilla, but he actually got hurt in that match, so he didn't make their postseason team. And I want to say Elon Hurd got hurt too, and like both those guys were, you know, out of Grandview ranked 2-3, you know, at some point last year. But man, like Ramirez, dude, I want to say he was a national champ in junior college, had a really good run at, say, like Cliff Keen, all that other stuff. And so, you know, seeing him kind of down at, you know, 7-8, I don't know about that. Probably, you know, should be a little bit higher. And then this was kind of at least in small college wrestling, it's one of the more interesting stories of the offseason. You know, you have Coach Piccolo, who was coaching at Mustang, you know, Division I All-American, all that good stuff. You know, he kind of brought a crew of those like OU Sooners over, and this is kind of where you see, you know, kind of one of the first ones hop into the rankings. So John Wiley, he was like our U23 World Team rep a couple years ago. Never quite cracked the lineup at OU, and so you know, kind of interesting to see where, you know, at least they're starting their season. You know, and like I said, there's a lot of good wrestling. So if you're kind of from the outside looking in and you're watching, you're like, oh man, like, well, these guys are gonna, sleepwalk their way through it. I know they're wrestling for their old coach. I know they're going to be training hard and they're going to do well. I'm sure they're really excited, but it's not going to, it might win it, all that good stuff, but it's not going to be easy. I'll just say that. And moving forward, all right, 1 and 2, returning national finalist, returning national champ, Cam Robinson, Iowa State transfer, really, really tough. His teammate Dylan Witt. All right, so there are a couple things that jump off the page to me at this weight. Okay, so a couple of guys that I used to, have the opportunity to coach. So you get, a Jordan Lamella here, like, he's a dog, but he spent some time, like, he's been ranked all the way up at 84. So this is a new weight class for him. So that's, I'm really excited. And he's got a, tough body type to wrestle, like really good gas tank, really slick on his feet. And, 65, that'd be, great to see how he does down there. The other guy got to coach Dayton Hill. He's got, he's coming off a red shirt, wrestling over at Missouri Valley with a couple, of other guys that used to be on the old squad. But man, he's a hammer too, man. He's dangerous. He can beat a lot of these guys. Like in the past, he's pinned, Xander Erst, who's an All-American. I think he majored, #1 last year from Providence, Hobbs. So like, I'm just really excited. This is his kind of last hurrah, and I know he's working really hard, and I just love watching him wrestle, man, and want great things for him. But with all that being said too, the one thing that I think really kind of flew under the radar is Southeastern got a really good transfer with Jovan Mitchell. So he, started his career at Missouri Valley, didn't quite, crack through in the lineup at Grandview, but I want to say he had something like 2 wins over, Dylan Witt last year. So, he's a guy that, sometimes the hardest thing about maybe a life or Grandview is just kind of even getting out of that room and being one of the 12 guys that gets to go. So, I mean, I'm excited to see how he does, kind of getting his chance, because he has some really, really good wins, and I'm sure that there's probably like a fire lit, there for him, to maybe go prove a point, like, man, you guys should have took me, all that good stuff. So that'll be another really interesting storyline to, follow. All right, so you got Ketchum, returning national finalist, just a different singlet. He wrestled Reynolds from Grandview. I think he was at St. Thomas, so he transfers over there. He's got another, couple multiple-time All-Americans, Shadrack Sloan, Francis Morrissey, another guy who used to be able to coach. I love watching him wrestle. He's a dog. Just, wrestled at the Beach World Championships. Roman Garcia, another multiple-time All-American, split match with Francis. So, I mean, like, this, like, top 5, 6, at this weight, about as good as any you're going to get in the country. And, obviously, this is kind of OU transfer number 2, like Tate Piccolo. So this is all, like, he is obviously really talented. I don't know if he ever dealt with injuries, but I know he was like who's #1 back in the day. I think he was up at like 195 maybe, like a little higher weight class. But I mean, coming out of high school, probably one of the best guys in the country, and kind of his last season too. So, it's going to be kind of interesting to see, the impact that, he has right away, and, wrestling for his dad and, all that kind of stuff. So this is going to be a really, really, I mean, this weight class going to crown a new national champ with Reynolds graduating, and man, I'm really interested to kind of see how some of that goes. So moving forward, 84, I thought I'd seen Bufordy. Sorry if I didn't say that right. I thought I saw that he'd accepted a coaching position at Doane. But if not, man, like, hey, I'm a second, place guy that got to run it back, for a senior season. And, like, so I'm always rooting for guys that, wrestling that match maybe didn't get what they wanted, and kind of just being able to kind of finish on their own terms. So if he's wrestling, that's awesome, man, and good luck, if you happen to listen. But Norfleet, I want to say he was a Division I transfer. His older brother wrestled at Arizona State. Really, really tough. JD, NAIA wrestler of the year last year, that was a semifinal opponent. And then Norfleet kind of just blitzed everybody else in the bracket. I think he pinned or bonused his way through the backside. So I don't think these two matched up. So, I mean, that's, that's a fun matchup. And that's, to me, a pretty clear, probably top 2 if that kind of holds, all things considered. And then kind of past that, it's, another, and I always like to kind of highlight maybe some teams that you don't see a ton, but you have William Woods University. I think Wetzel was maybe like a blood round guy in Division III. So coming across divisions, that's always going to be kind of interesting. And then you just seeing another program with somebody to kind of build around, which also kind of part of my experience where where I spent my time in college, our first year program, things like that. So it's exciting, right? Like you get a little bit of parity, you get some different names, some different teams, and see some different people and programs having some success. So kind of a name to keep an eye on. And another weight where you're going to crown a new national champ no matter what. All right, so you got GK. Fun fact for him, right? He actually made the U23 world team, and he made it in a pretty tough weight class. So I think like Adina, or I don't want to pronounce his name wrong, but the Iowa transfer at 97, right? So he actually won the bracket, of like the Iowa 97 starters bracket. So he's really freaking good. Grape is a multiple-time All-American. He wrestled at Doane, transferred to Southeastern. So they got a couple like really good transfers. And the point total between really all three, I mean, anything can happen. Preseason, we covered it. Take it with a grain of salt. But they got a couple guys that can go, for sure right away. And, they're actually ranked #1 right now in the conference, head of life, and just a pretty tight race there for that 2 spot. So, I mean, that's always fun, when you can kind of, get involved in a team race. But, man, this is like a weight where it's like, it's so hard to see GK losing. Like, I think he got a really, really unique story. And I know I'm probably supposed to be talking about like dark horse guys and stuff, but, it's unique to have an NAIA guy on the world team. And, I feel like that gap is pretty wide there. And so like if this is like a first reaction thing, the first thing that I thought, I was like, man, you know what I would do? You see like well, I shouldn't say I don't have all the info, right, with teams, but you see #4 Gentry Smith, you see #2, so you have the 2 and 4 guys at each weight. It's like, man, go do that Zane Lanham diet. This is a big boy, great, man, like let him bump up, because you go look at #1 and #1, man, and you want to go win one. It just feels like, and it's no disrespect to anybody else, but man, it just feels like that heavyweight is a little bit more wide open, and it depends on what your goals are. Because I know Grape, multiple time All-American, he's probably gotten just about every other place, and if you want to go win it, right, that might be a good look. And a lot of those kind of like 97, big frame athletic guys go have a lot of success, kind of moving forward. So yeah, kind of, sorry I don't have like anything too interesting to say. I'm kind of browsing through these names again and seeing, what we got. But Landon Williams, this is the other thing. And back at even 84, you look at it, it's kind of interesting to see, so many of these, like, maybe Life Grandview guys kind of ranked, outside of these seeds. And those lineups will shift a lot. You got to get to some tournaments and some things like that. But, man, you look at Life, they got an 18 and a 21 here. And I'm not super familiar with these names. Grayson Stevens, 22. I think that was an All-American bunch of years back, maybe for Campbellsville. So, that's kind of a relatively low rank there, too. So, man, like, yeah. I'm sure this is going to a weight that's going to see, a lot of shifts. Then just kind of moving on to heavyweight. Yeah, this Foy dude, he's cool, man. Like, I remember as a freshman, we got to duel the, Central Methodist a couple times, and dude, he just like lets it fly. He was another guy, national finalist last year, and I think ultimately he lost to Southeastern's heavyweight. I have no idea why I'm blanking on a name right now, but multiple-time national champ, good at wrestling. But he did it out of a low seed too. But this is like also another one of those like really interesting stories in wrestling. You get, you can kind of go be fearless when you're a, double-digit seed, and maybe you're not supposed to, go make that run, or maybe somebody's nervous because you beat somebody you're not supposed to beat. You go, create some momentum for yourself. But every time I've watched him though, like he just, fully will send it. He gets, over under, he's gonna throw it. He's gonna be in attack mode. Really fun to watch. Awesome run last year, and like Coach Cartwright does a awesome job. So hopefully he can kind of repeat on that success. They had multiple national finalists last year, which pretty awesome accomplishment. So like kind of the one name here for me, Gabe Jacobs, transferred to Life. He was like one of those perennial top 3 guys. Really, really good wrestler. I think he sat a year because of he transferred in conference coming over from Southeastern. But I mean, that's a name that, especially, over the last, 4 or 5 years that you saw a lot of. So, I mean, I expect to kind of see him, climb into, there's not a ton of room to climb when you're number 6, but he kind of, a name, he might actually be he's on everybody's radar, right? Like he's going to be probably one of those top 2 guys, at least in my mind, of like from what I've seen and watched, and things like that. So, like I said, nothing too crazy, guys. Like just trying to give a little bit of insight to some of this stuff. And I probably definitely, I know I missed a ton, right? So if I did, let me know in the comments who I should be, keeping an eye on, right? And no hard feelings, right? Best of luck to everybody, right? One thing, ever since I started posting, some content, it's all like, just because I'm complimenting somebody doesn't mean that it's at the expense of somebody else. I just love good wrestling, and taking a step back from college coaching is fun because I can kind of root for multiple programs and individuals and just really kind of enjoy the product as a whole. But yeah, like hopefully I can kind of continue to give a little bit more, shine a little bit more of a light on small college wrestling, at every level. So I want to continue to do it. So let me know who I should keep an eye on, and maybe we can kind of do some updates throughout the season. So hope you enjoyed it. First time trying it. It'll get better. Thanks for watching.